Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on Arrow Season 7, and this is going to be my review for Episode 7 for Season 7, otherwise entitled The Slabside Redemption. But of course, before we continue, if you've not watched the episode, go watch it, then come back to this video later on, because, man, some stuff goes down in this episode, so you want to, make sure you're not getting spoiled. But if you are continuing on, if you've watched the episode, let me know in the comments section down below. What was your favourite part? What did you think of the episode overall? Was it your favourite episode of the season? Let me know all of that in the comments section down below. And of course, if you enjoyed the episode, why wouldn't you drop a like on the video? Show your support for the Arrow stuff and the Arrow content on the channel by dropping a like. And yeah. So last episode, the last episode had some minimal prison stuff. It was more about getting Diaz in the situation where he would be heading to prison. So that's really the big thing to talk about. And obviously at the end of last episode, Felicity was on the brink of I reckon, and people have debated this, but I reckon she was going to kill Diaz. I think if Laurel hadn't come in, Felicity would have just pondered for a bit, made it a bit more suspenseful, and then probably still shot him, because Felicity's been targeting him for ages. But because Diaz was the key to getting Oliver out of prison, she sort of had to stand back and be like, okay, well, yeah, Oliver's getting out of prison, that's much more important. But obviously that was the major thing from last episode leading into this one. And I guess also Oliver finds out that Stanley isn't the most trustworthy person. But we start off the episode by finding out that Oliver is actually 6 hours away from freedom. So in 6 hours, he'd be moved to the receiving, I can't remember what they called it, but it's basically, if you're leaving prison, it's that area. And it's basically the, being, whatever the term is. Just basically the process of getting let out of prison. That's where he would have been heading in about 6 hours. So he had to be a good boy for another 6 hours. But Diaz was like, haha, not happening, mate. And that's, of course, when we see Diaz being brought into prison. So I thought, you think the safe thing to do is, this is probably the only, thing I think about, maybe, is that Diaz and Oliver, obviously big foes. Diaz would have been coming into prison around, between 5 and 6 hours before Oliver would have been let out. So you would think, hopefully, they would have put Diaz in a different area. But just by chance, if Diaz had been properly processed through the prison system and just been put into prison, would he and Oliver have been in the same area for 4 hours until Oliver got released? Am I thinking that wrong? That's probably my only question mark on the episode. But regardless of that, it doesn't matter, because he doesn't get into that predicament. Instead, he's paid off a guard, and that's how he gets in. Shoot up some guards, take some uniforms, and boom, we're in. But we do see Oliver confronting Stanley over basically the stuff that happened at the end of last episode. And Stanley's once again being his over-enthused self to Oliver, and sort of wanting Oliver to help him once he gets out of prison, to sort of help Stanley with his case, because Stanley's been going on since we met him essentially this season that he was wrongfully imprisoned, he didn't do what they said he did, and all of that. And you're sort of looking at Stanley, you believe that because he's small. What could he have really done? And we'll jump into what he did, because it was admitted, but maybe some change from the comics that they did that was sort of necessary, just to maybe not make it so grim, but we might find out more about him going forward. Now, obviously, Stanley had done that thing, and sort of Oliver had basically got Bronze Tiger wrongfully put in solitary confinement. So we see Oliver go to Bronze Tiger and sort of promise he's going to help him on the outside and talk to Lila about some certain things. Hard to tell whether he's almost referencing the Suicide Squad, as that's the way of Argus getting him out of prison. Maybe he joins the Suicide Squad again, or some sort of task force for Argus. Hard to tell there, or if it's just to basically get him released on good terms and stuff like that. And we do see at the end of the episode that Bronze Tiger is sort of on good terms with the prison guards due to his help in the situation that happens in this episode. But I'm guessing we'll find out more as we'll follow that more. Maybe not in the next couple of episodes, but later in the season, maybe when it's relevant, and maybe when Bronze Tiger might come back into the picture. Because I think with what Team Arrow could be facing this season, an extra set of claws might come in handy. But that scene between Diaz and Oliver in the prison meeting room, would you call it? The visitor section of the prison was pretty tense. Just not on Oliver's end, mainly on Diaz's end, just the threats he's giving, and just Kirk Acevedo, I think, does a really, really good job with Diaz, especially in those moments where he is just getting angry without getting too emotional, if that makes sense. Just that subtle vagueness of his anger, I think, is just great. He does a really good job in this episode. Throughout the whole episode, I think you could argue that he is the MVP. I think he does a really, really good job in this episode, Kirk Acevedo. But that scene was definitely one of my favorites. This episode just did so well in regards to everything. The action scenes and just the dialogue scenes with two people sitting down or standing up just having a chat with nothing going on. They were all great. It's just, I can't believe it. We'll talk more about this episode as a whole as we move, deeper into the episode review. One of my favorite scenes in this episode was actually Oliver crafting. So having like the battery that was inside the soap, the chewing gum, and the deodorant can, and just making like a makeshift grenade essentially. I thought that was really cool, just seeing like the crafting. Almost makes you wish you had seen a bit more of it, just for like little things. But that was just a really cool scene, just like the skill of it all. And we know in prison and another prison escape movies and stuff like that crafting is a thing. So it's cool to see some elements of it in this episode. Even though it was short and brief, it was still really cool to see. But with Diaz now in the prison, of course, he's going to gather up a little army of his own, and we see him taking control of the prison inmates after taking out some of the guards, and some pretty cool, like a throat. He slices a couple of throats in this episode, Diaz. We'll talk about the slitting of throats in a second, or a bit later in the video, because bit far maybe, just not, we'll talk about it in a second anyway. But taking control of the inmates and stuff was just a great scene. But obviously, I guess, no, actually I won't criticize it, because I was going to say, would they really be too heavily against Oliver Queen for the most part? But I guess, if this dude's to come in and just be like, oh, yeah, of course they're going to follow him, so I guess you can't really, nitpick that. I think it was all sweet. There might be a couple that might not have done anything, but I think for the most part, most of them would have been like, yeah, stuff this Green Arrow dude. Fight the man. Let's fight against the man. So I can understand that. But with all of it basically being just him against the prisoners, of course he's going to need someone to help him. And that's where Bronze Tiger comes back into it. Now I did like how they made a little bit of a joke about like, I think Oliver asked him, like, how'd you get out of your prison? He's like, well, how'd you get out of yours? Just basically glossing over how he would have got out of solitary confinement. But we don't need to know Bronze Tiger's methods. Maybe he knew that stuff was going on, that the prison was going to shambles. He's like, well, I don't need to pretend that I can't get out of here anymore, so let's just break out of this little cell. So I thought that was pretty funny. But onto the other, like, throat-slitting incident by Diaz, we actually see him hold the blade up and, like, blood start to come out. Now, people might think that's such a minor thing, but for Arrow's time slot, saying it is on the earlier side of things, that's actually pretty big. Now, they did say going into the season that in certain scenes in prison specifically, they would be pushing boundaries of what they could show at that time slot and on the CW. So that's probably one of those things. Like, even in like some of the Netflix shows, they don't even really show the throat being slit that much. They might show blood splatter and stuff like that, but they don't actually show like the knife going in and blood start to drip out. Obviously, we didn't see the full throat slitting, but it was pretty far. So I was sort of surprised by that, but then I went back to that point where like they said that they were going to push the boundaries in this episode, or in this season, might I say, in the prison stuff. So that's obviously one of the things they were referencing. But I must say, the fight choreography in this episode was great all around, but I don't think it can, and just the direction in general, but that like couple of scenes that were, I guess, put together when the inmates were released by Diaz, and it's just like, there's like a scene where Oliver and Bronze Tiger are going up, and I think they're trying to save the guards, I think it is. And it's like a one shot, and it's just great. Like the fight sequences, I don't think you can really nitpick the choreography. Sometimes with these shows, you're going to say, oh, that person's moved before they, or after they've been punched, or like before they've been punched. And you can really nitpick it, especially if you go super slow-mo and stuff like that. But from like just face value watching it, I really couldn't see any issues with the choreography, and that's just great. I think it was just awesome on that side, as well as the direction, especially that one shot was really cool. It's just like going up this, like the prison stuff, because it's like 3 or 4 levels and just going up there. I thought it was really good. And just the choreography in general was just amazing. And, you have to give big raps to that. But we do get the true story, or at least most of the story around Stanley, as we see him, like sedate Oliver, or like drug Oliver, if you just want to call it that. And Oliver's knocked out, and Stanley ties him up. And we find that Stanley is actually a murderer. Now, he says that he's killed, he doesn't just say like, oh, that other person, but we find out that he actually did kill that guard, which I think we all knew from the end of last episode and the beginning of this episode as well. But he said he's almost like insinuates that he's killed many more people, like at least more than 1 or 2. Now, in the comics, they do say Dover in this episode as well. I think Stanley Dover, they haven't really mentioned too much, but they've mentioned Stanley a couple of times, but his full name is Stanley Dover. In the comics, Stanley Dover there's 2 versions of him, but the older version is basically a serial child murderer, and he sacrifices kids. They might dive into that in this season. Look, they said he murdered people. They don't necessarily reference their age or anything like that. This would be Arrow going into a very dark territory. Let me know in the comments, would you want them to go down that sort of path? It would be different. Like, it could be a bit grim and maybe a bit too personal with some people. which could be a reason why they might avoid it. But in the comics, Stanley is a child murderer, serial child murderer. So they could go with that this season because they've just admitted that he's killed multiple people. I don't know, and he had to do something bad to end up in maximum security. So, I don't know. Let me know if you want to see that, but that's what his character is like in the comics. But I must say, a Coke can or just a soda can in a bag, who thought it would be such a good weapon? Usually it's like soap in a bag or something like that, or soap in a sock. Coke can in a bag, just swinging around, you're gonna win your fight. I thought that was pretty cool. But essentially, we see the prison just go up in flames. So it's Diaz has that thing that's going to go off and just start this like big electrical fire essentially. And yeah, it provided some really cool just imagery with all the fights going on and stuff like that, with all these flames and people falling over and stuff. I thought it was really cool. Like, this episode must have been a bit expensive to make, but it was definitely worth it. But the Diaz versus Oliver fight, man, brutal. Obviously, had the first one, which only went for a bit, which is when Diaz basically just smashed on Oliver. But the second one, where you think Oliver's just getting slammed, and Diaz has those drugs in him, we know, so he's basically like almost like a Mirakuru sort of soldier. But he's just basically like smashing Oliver, stabbing him, kicking him, and making Oliver do flips into a wall. It was insane. It was just, I couldn't believe it, to be completely honest. Like, really, it was just... I hope we get more fight scenes like that going forward. But essentially, we do actually see Oliver eventually win. I think we all knew that was going to happen because I think Diaz was obviously going to push Oliver to death. That's what Diaz was going to do, but trying to make him suffer at the exact same time. So, you know, I think we know that, yeah. So, anyway, it was a very brutal fight. I think some could argue that maybe it was surprising that Oliver won, but I think we all knew who was going to win at some point, and he just had to use these tactics, might I say, and wait for the right moment to strike, and that's exactly what Oliver did. But obviously, one of the big, could you call it a cliffhanger? A cliffhanger, or a big, like, oh crap moment, was obviously when Brick's in the morgue. I was sort of confused because Oliver has the shaved head. I was looking at distance and I was like, is that Brick or is that Oliver? It was one of the two. But it's Brick and he's going to escape through the morgue because, as we know, the morgue and stuff like that. And someone comes in like, okay, who's this dude that's like, who's got a bit of a swag to him? And it's Stanley. And I'm like, oh, okay, something's here. And as soon as that happens, like, Brick is so dead, or he's going to be heavily injured here. And that's exactly what happens. Brick's like, oh, the only way through here is through the morgue, but you don't have to be dead. And Stanley's like, well, yeah, that's true. And then just stabs him. Now, obviously, it's unclear whether Brick died. They don't show Brick die. But I guess we're led to believe that where he was stabbed, he would bleed out almost. I have to wait and see. Who knows? I can't remember if did we see him at the end of the episode after that? I don't think we did. I might be having a brain fart, am I? I don't think we did. But we saw Bronze Tiger. Don't think we saw him. Anyway. And also, Derek Samson gets lit on fire, and I'm guessing he's dead because he can't feel pain, but he just would have burned to death. Anyway. So, yeah, Stanley kills him, and Stanley escapes, and Stanley is just like... Who knows what... There's been people saying that Stanley's the big bad. He could possibly be the big bad. Who knows what they're going to do with him. It just matters what he's like on the outside and what connections he has. Because him himself couldn't be a big bad. You know, like, I don't think he's got, like, the physical presence to deal with Oliver and just anything like that. But I guess it matters what his connections on the outside and what his deal is out there. I think that's a big... the big thing that's going to decide whether he could be big bad worthy. But I don't think people would mind if Stanley was the big bad. Sure, he doesn't look like your typical classic big bad, especially for Arrow. Maybe for like the Flash, you could pass it off if he had some sort of powers or something. But for for Arrow, you'd be like, no, that wouldn't work at all. But you know, they can make it work. And I think people would probably maybe prefer him to be the big bad because it'd be just something completely different. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you think of that. But yeah, you know, Stanley got out of prison, so it's only fair that Oliver gets out of prison. So we see Diggle and Felicity are there, and there's the big Olicity reunion, if you want to call it. Don't know if I'd be kissing Oliver. He's probably got blood in his mouth and stuff like that. Maybe a loose tooth might come out. Oh, what's this? Oh, it's your tooth, Oliver. But anyway, yeah, so that's reunited. I did see the promo for next week quickly. Very surprising. Oliver's back in action immediately with some surprising changes. But yeah, overall, let's just jump into it. This episode, it did exactly what I wanted this episode to do. Now, I was talking to my Discord before this started, and I was like, do you think this episode will be completely in prison? And everyone was like, yeah and no. People thought it might cut out, and I was like, hopefully it doesn't, because it will ruin just the flow of it. And they did exactly what they needed to do for an episode like this, which is stay in prison. Obviously, that end scene was technically out of prison, but it was still on the island where Slabside is. So They did exactly what they needed to do. Have it all in prison. Have it focused on Oliver, Diaz, and I guess the allies of each of them. And then I guess whatever Stanley was trying to do as well. The fight scenes, amazing. The dialogue between characters, amazing. The set design and stuff, especially when the prison's up in flames and all the set design, you know, like how they did everything with the set when like the prison's up in flames and there's just stuff going on. Awesome. They push the boundaries with blood and stuff like that. I know it's something some of you might be thinking, oh, that's not pushing the boundaries. It is for this time slot and the network it's on. Like it's something that you usually wouldn't see here. So this episode, man, I was having a thing, like I started recording this review maybe like 5 minutes after I watched the episode, and from the end of the episode, even during the episode until I started recording, I was thinking, I can't think of the last episode I enjoyed and I thought that was as good as this one. Now, I'm sure there was an episode last season that maybe competed with it, but the thing is that this was focused. Just completely focused on the prison stuff, which is a rarity with Arrow, because whether it be like the flashbacks in past seasons or just, you know, different characters and their stories going on, but they allowed this episode to focus, which would explain why last episode the prison stuff was actually some of the minor stuff that was going on. So I think they nailed this episode. If I gave ratings, I would probably give it a 10 out of 10. I would probably give it a 10 out of 10. And that's just me being completely honest. I don't like giving ratings, but if I had to, I can't nitpick anything, which is just, Like, the only thing I could really nitpick was maybe the Diaz stuff right at the beginning, where it's like, would they bring Diaz in around the same time that Oliver would be getting out, because they'd probably have to mingle for a couple of hours if Diaz got processed properly. That'd be my only nitpick. But apart from that, I can't think of anything that really pushes Arrow down this episode points. You got to start at a 10 and just move it down. Or you can have marking criteria that pushes it up. But I like to say that every episode starts at a 10 and then the wrong stuff pushes it down. And I can't think of anything. I honestly can't. This episode just was so good. I can't wait to rewatch it without having me take notes and just sit back and absorb the greatness that was Arrow Season 7, Episode 7, aka the Slabside Redemption. It was just, you know, kudos to James Bamford, Beth Schwartz, and Stephen Amell, and I guess Kirk Acevedo, Michael J. White. Everyone involved with this episode that had some sort of main part, congratulations, because this episode, best episode of the Arrowverse this season, even though Arrow, I think, already had the best episode of the Arrowverse this season, this has trumped it, and I think it's going to be hard to beat it. But let's hope they do. Let's hope they do. Let's hope we get a 12 out of 10 episode sometime this season. But, man, how good. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like in the video to show your support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on this episode. What was your favourite part? Don't even bother writing what was your least favourite part, because it's just going to be another awesome part, because this episode was amazing. But just let me know all your different opinions on this episode in the comment section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.